Okay, so today is the first session of the first semester on Frobenius subalgebra lattices in tensor categories. So the introductory part of this class will be given by slides, which summary the introduction of a paper I wrote with Moina Ghosh on she's on arXiv. So this class will cover this paper. So the first session, the first two sessions, first 2 or 3 sessions will be with slides like that, and then we will give a course by hand. But for the introduction, I guess we will cover the entire work by this slide, and then we will go into the details later, slowly. Okay, so if you are not yet in the WeChat group, you can scan this QR code. So this QR code will work for 1 week. On WeChat, you need to renew the QR code every week. So if you watch the video 1 week after March 5th, this QR code will no more work. So, okay. Okay. So some motivation. So this class will be mainly tensor categorical, monoidal category, tensor category, fusion category, etc. But the motivation for this work comes from analysis. So don't be afraid if you are not analyst, because we will not do analysis in this work, but it's very important to explain the motivation coming from analysis, more precisely coming from subfactor theory. Okay. So in fact, subfactor theory is in between analysis, at the intersection of analysis, if you like, and category theory. So here you have subfactor theory here. Yeah. So in fact, when people developed subfactor theory after Bohn-Jones' seminal paper in 83, index of subfactor, people developed, in fact, use both functional analysis tools and categorical tools in the same time, and it was a little bit confused. So today, it may be relevant to distinguish the functional analysis aspect of subfactor theory from its categorical component. So, this result, due to Jones, Longo, Poppa, Bish, Muger, Ghosh, Penis, etc., states the following. So a finite index subfactor is, so with quote, which means that you need more details to give something precise mathematically, but intuitively you can understand. So a finite index subfactor is a unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category together with essential analytical data that arise outside the amenable case. So here, so again, don't worry about that. What is amenable case, hyperfinite, etc. Subfactor. This course will not be about that, but this is our motivation. So it's good to know for your yeah, good to know. So here, what is important here is that the analytical aspect, analytical data, appear outside the amenable case. So, for example, amenable case, one subcase of the amenable case is hyperfinite finite depth. So if you have a finite index of factor which is hyperfinite finite depth, it is amenable. And so the finite index of factor only have categorical data. There is no analytical data in the amenable case. But outside the amenable case, for example, if you consider mainly infinite depths of factor, you have categorical data, but also analytical data. And nowadays, for example, Dietmar Bisch is very interested in working on the analytical aspect of infinite depths of factor. But in this work, we will focus on the categorical aspect. So you have two aspects, analytical, categorical. You have subfactor theory in the middle. Yeah. So therefore, the notion of Frobenius algebra. So here we said that in fact, so finite index of factor is more or less the same thing as Frobenius algebra with some extra assumption like that. So the notion of Frobenius algebra in a monoidal category extend the notion of finite index amenable subfactor. So you have to specify that, otherwise you will have some extra analytical data, so which is not extended by just Frobenius algebra. So you have to specify that, but anyway. So it's natural to translate the relevant subfactor result to Frobenius algebra theory and examine the extent to which they remain valid in this broader setting. So by extend, what do we mean? Here, for example, for subfactor, we are unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category. So we have one constraint here, and another constraint here, compared to here, monoidal category, which is much, much, much more general. Frobenius algebra in monoidal category is much more general than that. So this is the sense of this sentence. Examine the extent to which some result, which hold here, continue to be true in this very general setting. So this is the motivation of this work. So the starting point is to Watatani's finiteness theorem. So in this paper, you have the archive code here. So the goal is to translate Watatani's finiteness theorem, which we will explain, more details in the next slide. So translate it from subfactor theory to category theory, and then try to extend as much as possible to general setting. Okay. So for this theorem involve lattice of intermediate subfactor. That's why we are interested in lattice of Frobenius subalgebra. So why? Here is the dictionary. Here is Watatani's theorem in the language of subfactor theory. Every irreducible finite index subfactor has a finite lattice of intermediate subfactor. So this is due to Watatani in 96. So it's it's a 30 years old result. Wait. Why do I have this? Anyway. But this result admits a purely categorical reformulation suggested by Dave Pennis in private. So every connected unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category has a finite lattice of unitary Frobenius subalgebra. And look at the color, connected in green correspond to irreducible in green here. Unitary Frobenius algebra in the unitary tensor category in blue here correspond to finite index of factor. And unitary Frobenius subalgebra in red correspond to intermediates of factor here. So this is a dictionary. In the functional analysis setting or subfactor setting, irreducible translate into connected, etc., etc. Subfactor correspond to Frobenius algebra because it's an object, etc. Subalgebra, Frobenius subalgebra correspond to intermediate subfactor, etc. So the aim of this talk is to introduce the notion involved in this reformulation, to explain the extent to which we relaxed the unitary and tensor assumption, and to discuss application. So we will not just extend. So why you have this green thing? This is French. Anyway, we will not just extend the result, we will also apply it to Hopf algebra theory, to C-star algebra theory, etc. Okay. So now the motivation is complete. Now we can start to recall very briefly the basic definition of monoidal category from Frobenius algebra. During the class, I guess we will not go into more details about the general theory of monoidal category and tensor category. For that, I refer to the book Tensor Category by Ettinghoff, Pielakinic, Shostrik, where you, and also the book of MacLean, if you like. And I did several semester classes on this topic several years ago. But we will go into much more details during the class about Frobenius algebra object, etc. But for here, let me briefly recall the notion of monoidal category. So, monoidal category. So this definition is due to MacLean. So provide a categorification of the concept of monoid. Remember, the monoid is a weaker version of a group, if you like. So the element, so I don't remember, monoid is a group. You have inverse, without inverse, yeah. So yeah, a monoid with an inverse is a group. So you need a monoid. It's a set with a law, a product with a neutral element. So we need to, what is the categorification of this notion? So the element of the set become the object of the category. The product becomes the tensor product. And the unit axiom of the monoid correspond to unit axiom for the unit object in the category. And the associativity of the product correspond to a notion of associativity on the category encoded by a natural isomorphism. This natural isomorphism, this way. Remember, so you have to recall, if you are not enough familiar with the notion with category theory, the notion of natural isomorphism has a very precise definition. It's a natural transformation. So natural transformation is satisfies some very precise axiom with some commuting diagram. And a natural isomorphism is a natural transformation in which, for which the family of map are isomorphism like that. So this notion is very precise. It's not just like that. So encoding the associativity. So it's not just that. In fact, the associativity for the product in a monoid is just an equality. A, B, C equal A, B, C. So this is an equality, but for tensor category, you replace the equality by isomorphism, and this collection of isomorphism should satisfy the commuting diagram of a natural transformation. So this is very precise. And together with that should satisfy the pentagon action. Very important. How do you so this pentagon action is saying how to deal with the parenthesis. So you have, if you take here, you have 3 objects. You have 2 ways to make parenthesis. If you have 4 objects, you have 5 ways to make parenthesis. This 5 way. What is the connection? So here you have 2 ways. You have the isomorphism between the two. Here you have 5 ways, and you can cook the isomorphism. So here you see you group together A and B. So you come back to something with 3 objects. If A, B is 1 object, A tensor B. So you apply the natural isomorphism. And here again, you consider C tensor B as a unit, as a single object. So you apply again. And again, here, you just put the identity on D, and you apply the natural isomorphism here. And same identity on A, natural isomorphism here. And the pentagon axiom is saying that for going from there to there, you have, for going from there to there, you have 2 ways. You have two possible isomorphisms, this way and this way. And the pentagon axiom is just saying that these 2 ways, these 2 isomorphisms are equal. So here it's really an equality. This is the same isomorphism. Okay. So so if you want more details, go to McLean's book. But the more recent tensor category book, as I mentioned, provide a lot of details. Or my class I gave several years ago, if you like. So I will not come back to that in my in the main content of the class. Okay. Now, what about notion of Frobenius algebra object in a monoidal category? So you take a monoidal category exactly as defined here, and you take an object X together with several what's the name? Morphism. Several morphism. And so the notion of Frobenius algebra is the data of an object together with the data of all these morphisms. So here you have a structure for the 2 first morphisms, a structure for the 2 last morphisms, and an extra constraint. So XME. So M corresponds to the multiplication. So here we read the picture from top to bottom. So you start from 2 objects, X tensor X, and you arrive to X alone. So this encodes the multiplication. This corresponds to the multiplication of an algebra, if you like. This generalize the multiplication of an algebra. And E is a morphism from 1 for the unit to X. So this, you can see that as an embedding of the unit in X. So you can see that as 1 in X. But here we are in category. So you see the generalization. We are in category theory. And in category theory, X may not be a set. X is just an object. And in fact, we know example in which it's explicitly not a set. So we cannot say 1 in X. This makes no sense because X is not a set. But what we can say is the existence of a morphism from the unit object to X. So the unit object will be represented by this dot, blue dot here. Okay, so axiom of an algebra, associativity. So if so again, the associativity of algebra A, B, C equal A, B, C. Well, A, B, C are if A, B, C, if X is a set and A, B, C are elements that correspond to what I wrote, but because X is not a set, you encode the associativity purely diagrammatically like that, by using the multiplication morphism, by this equality between these two diagrams. This is the parenthesis like that. And here you have the parenthesis like that. Okay. And it's a unital algebra. So what is unital? If you have 1A equal A1 in a set, but here we are not in a set. So if you combine the unit morphism with the multiplication morphism, you get identity. So this corresponds to identity. And same if you combine on the right. Okay. So this is how to the purely categorical way to write an algebra, unital algebra object in the monoidal category, which may not be a set. Okay. So in particular, this is not an algebra in a set theoretical sense. It's an algebra object in a monoidal category. Okay, so here this is just the co-unital coalgebra definition. So this is exactly the same thing as that, but you just reverse every diagram. You reverse this way, reverse, etc. So so this corresponds to the co-multiplication, the co-unit, co-associativity, and co-unitality, etc. So this is okay. If X satisfies this property, this constraint, X is a unital algebra and a co-unital coalgebra, but this is not enough for making it a Frobenius algebra. What we need is an extra constraint which connect the two structures. Here you see it involves the multiplication and the co-multiplication. Multiplication, co-multiplication, etc. And so you have these pictures, in fact. So, of course, the notion of Frobenius algebra can be also defined by more algebraically, if you like, by formula. But in fact, it is much more natural to see it pictorially. This is very clear like that. In fact, most of the proof we will do during this class, not in this slide, because we will not go into the details during this introduction session, but when we will do the details, most of the proof will be by picture, which is pictorial proof, what is called the graphical calculus. Graphical calculus. So this is, for people which are not used to that, this is something which is mathematically mathematically what's the name? This is very rigorous. It's mathematically very rigorous. So you can see people started to do like that, maybe in physics, for example, by Feynman diagram, etc. So at that time, it was not so mathematically rigorous, but nowadays, you have plenty of, in the literature, everything is defined very rigorously. So doing graphical calculus in the good setting, of course, you have to specify the good setting. You are in monoidal category, etc. So very precise. It makes really sense. It's very mathematically rigorous. And so most of the proof will be by pictures, and it makes the proof very intuitive, and this is very nice. Okay. And so the use of these pictures, in fact, will be essential in their proof. Okay. So I distinguish when I say X is a set or not a set. In fact, what I should say, which is whether it's a vector space or not, in fact. And a very specific case of Frobenius algebra is when the monoidal category is the trivial category of finite-dimensional vector space. Callback. So you fix a field K and a Frobenius algebra in vec K, so the category of finite-dimensional vector space over K. So if you specify this category, then this definition reformulate into this definition. So it's a finite-dimensional unital K-algebra together with a non-degenerate associative bilinear form kappa. Or alternatively, so this is one definition. Alternative definition is to say it's a finite-dimensional unital K-algebra A, which is isomorphic to its dual as a module. Okay. So two equivalent definitions for Frobenius algebra in VEC. And what is the meaning of associative bilinear form? What is associative here is just kappa AB, C is kappa A, BC. Okay. And so what is the relation between the previous structure, categorical, the pictorial way to define, and this on vector space? In fact, what is kappa? So kappa, in this setting, so you recover kappa this way. You take the multiplication morphism composed with the co-unit. So you take a piece here and a piece here, and an ingredient here and here. And you compose the two, and what you get is really something from A tensor A to the field. So here I did not specify. When you don't write here, if you are not familiar with that, usually here you put some dots. But what does it mean? It means you are in one here. But one is just the vector space of dimension 1 in VEC. So in VEC, 1 is just the field. Okay. So it's something from A tensor A to the field, which is a bilinear form, etc., which satisfies all the. It's a non-degenerate associative bilinear form. This can be proved using the Frobenius and associativity or co-associativity structure. So, So be careful. The unit is K only, is a field only for VEC. If you take a general modular category or even a K-linear modular category, one will not be the field because the object may not be, in general, may not be vector space. Here, VEC is our vector space. Maybe I should remove that. Yeah, okay. Now I can no more write. Yeah, right. Again, I don't I don't know how to don't write with my finger. Anyway. Okay. So example. Um, so you take, so here the Frobenius algebra in VEC is, an example of Frobenius algebra in VEC. So here the Frobenius algebra is denoted A, but here A is not the Frobenius algebra, this is just a finite-dimensional unital K-algebra. So if you take a finite-dimensional unital K-algebra, or if you take the field, if you like, if you prefer to be for simplicity, but in general, for any finite-dimensional unital K-algebra, the algebra of matrice n by n matrices form a Frobenius algebra with kappa A, B, just the trace of A times B. So this is a Frobenius algebra. So of course, the main example is Mn of the field, or in fact, the main example is Mn of C for you take the complex field. But you can generalize that to any finite-dimensional unital K-algebra. Okay, so the trace of the product. Another example, you take a fusion ring. So if you don't know what is a fusion ring, I will not recall the definition here. But you can see the notion of fusion ring if you like. If it's a quantum generalization of the notion of finite group, if you like. It's not a quantum group, but anyway, you can see this. I gave a talk 1 year ago or 2 years ago called exotic quantum symmetry, exotic integral quantum symmetry. You can find this on YouTube or on BIMSA website, in which I explain in what sense the notion of fusion ring generalizes the notion of finite group, the quantum generalization of finite group. Anyway, so for any fusion ring, you take kappa AB to be the coefficient of the unit for the product of A and B. Okay. So this is also a Frobenius algebra in VEC. Okay. So wait a minute. 10 minutes. After 10 minutes. Yeah. So there will be a pause of 5 minutes after 10 minutes. Okay. So connected Frobenius algebra in a monoidal category. Okay. So recall. So let me come back here. We said that. Yeah. So we need the notion of connected Frobenius algebra. So connectedness, generalizing the notion of irreducible subfactor. So for people who don't know subfactor theory, you don't know what is irreducible. But as I said, this is just motivation. So if you don't know about that, I will not teach that here. But it's a very nice topic, notion of subfactor theory. So what is we need this connected ingredient. Constraint, connected Frobenius algebra in a monoidal category. So the definition is very simple. So the Frobenius algebra in a K-linear monoidal category. So here we need extra assumption, K-linear. So what is K-linear? K-linear means that the Hom space are K vector space. So it does not mean that the objects are vector space. Be careful, it's not that. what is mean is that the home space, so the morphism between two objects form a K-vector space. Okay, so this is, there should be some extra constraint, I forgot, but okay. So if you have that, then you look at this specific home space from your unit to X. So this is a vector space. And the connected assumption is just saying that it's one-dimensional. So it's one-dimensional, so it has a single generator. But from 1 to X, so a morphism from 1 to X, this is not, we already know a morphism from 1 to X, the unit morphism. So this means that connected means that the home space between 1 and X is just any morphism from 1 to X is a scalar multiple of the unit morphism, which is what this means. Yeah, okay. And this is very important. This is very important because in subfactor theory, people are mainly interested in irreducible subfactor, even if people nowadays were also interested in non-irreducible, but the main results, in particular Watt-Atanis theorem, are proof for irreducible subfactor. And in the classification of a small index of factor, most of them are irreducible. So people are, in subfactor theory, people are mainly interested in irreducible subfactor. On the other hand, the notion of Frobenius algebra comes from algebra theory. So this notion of Frobenius algebra in VEC pre-exists to the notion of Frobenius algebra in monoidal category by maybe 100 years, I don't know. It's a very old notion. But for Frobenius algebra in VEC, the equivalent of irreducible, which is connected, in fact, is completely trivial. So what it means that VEC, this category, is blind to connected phenomena. The only connected Frobenius algebra in VEC is the trivial algebra, the field. So there is nothing. So this is very, very funny. On one hand, you have Frobenius algebra theory. People are mainly interested in irreducible. On the other hand, you have Frobenius algebra in VEC. These two communities, in fact, was separated before Muger, I say, Longo, Muger, etc. So now that we know there are some intersection. But what people are mainly interested here in irreducible subfactor correspond to just the field here, K, for irreducible. So, in fact, you may not have, you cannot bring intuition when you want to prove something for generalize something for irreducible subfactor. You have no intuition coming from Frobenius algebra in VEC because this is only trivial. So something is essentially new here. Because the connected phenomena, Frobenius algebra in monoidal category, in the connected case, this is essentially new. You cannot translate techniques from Frobenius algebra in VEC because it's trivial. Okay. So, example of connected Frobenius algebra. So the first example is this one, in fact, in VEC, but it is the only example in VEC. Otherwise, we have to consider non-trivial category. So every finite dimensional of algebra is a Frobenius algebra in VEC. Is both a Frobenius algebra in VEC and in the category of finite dimensional representation on the dual of algebra. So this is a Frobenius algebra in two different categories. But be careful, it's not in general, it's not a Frobenius algebra in the category of representation of H. You have to go to the category of representation of the dual of H. So this is the point. This is one point because this is a usual usual trap. In fact, you try to represent H as a Frobenius algebra in a rep of H, but it's not working. You have to go there. So this is one point. You have two different categories in which it's a Frobenius algebra object. But it is only, unless it is one-dimensional, it is only connected. It cannot be connected here. It's connected only here. So you see, now the main result of the work will be to prove something regarding connected Frobenius algebra. So you see here, it's very important to choose the good for application, for example, to Hopf algebra theory. You have to choose the good category in which you represent, you put it as an object. So it's an object here, it's an object here, but it's only connected here. So the choice of the category is very important. So this is an example with Hopf algebra, but you can say other algebraic structure in which you have to be careful to choose the good category to get the good, so to be connected. Okay, so it's connected here. Okay. For example, so the group algebra, you can G a finite group. The group algebra is an example of Frobenius algebra. So it is connected, it's a connected Frobenius algebra in the representation category of the dual, which is just the category of G-graded vector space. So the group algebra is a connected Frobenius algebra in the category of G-graded vector space. So be careful. This is not the same as this one. This is just the trivial vec. So if you can say it's a vec with the trivial group, so the trivial grading. So this is vector space, but which are G-graded, so it's a non-trivial category. And in this example, this is really connected here. Okay. So example of algebra and group theory. Now example, the main example from subfactor theory. You take a finite index subfactor. So a subfactor, for people who don't know, it's an inclusion of factor. A factor is a simple von Neumann algebra, a von Neumann algebra with a trivial center, more precisely. And you have the notion of index, etc. But I will not give a course on that. This is only motivation. So this von Neumann algebra, this factor, is a Frobenius algebra in the tensor category of bimodule, NN bimodule. Okay, so here you can see this. Usually this is an infinite dimensional algebra in VEC. So in VEC, this is an infinite dimensional algebra, but in the category of NN bimodule, in the finite index case, it's a finite object, if you like. And it's a Frobenius algebra object. Yeah, here in this tensor category. So in the not just that, but more precisely, in the tensor category of NN bimodule generated by M. So you can take M. M is the NN bimodule, and you can make an NN bimodule product. You can generate. You can take the smallest tensor category containing M, and M is a Frobenius algebra in this tensor category. And it is connected if and only if the subfactor is irreducible, as we said before. So before the pause, so the pause is at 5. Yeah. So we will make the pause. So before the pause, let me just read the definition of tensor category I may not come back to that later. So if you want more details, again, go to the book Tensor Category by Ettinger, Gelachinici, Shostrik. The tensor category is a locally finite, k-linear, abelian, rigid, monoidal category where the unit object is simple. As I said, monoidal category generalizes the notion of monoid. Tensor category generalizes the notion of group, if you like. Rigid corresponds to inverse, etc. In fact, rigid monoidal category generalizes the notion of group. And then abelian k-linear is, so generation of group is just that. And then abelian k-linear are extra assumption to make your life easier. So very important. For example, for notion of connected, it's defined for k-linear. And some other result, we will need abelian, which we will maybe recall later. I forgot. Anyway, so we will make the pause now. So pause. 5-minute pause, and we will come back. Okay. So, as I said, monoidal category generalize notion of monoid. Rigid monoidal category generalize notion of group. The abelian structure is it's a categorical generalization, something to deal with, to have the notion of injective, surjective map, to have epimorphism, monomorphism, something like that. So it's a structure which permit to deal with injective map, surjective map. So even if you don't have set, so it makes no sense to say something. The morphism is injective, surjective because this is defined by on a set. But the notion of abelian category permits a structure which generalize that even if the objects are not set. And k-linear, as I said, means the space are vector space. Locally finite means you have finitely many simple objects, something like that. Mainly that. And it may be non-semi-simple, so you have to be careful. Here, the notion of tensor category don't have semi-simple. It means that semi-simple means that every object is a direct sum of simple objects. But in general, the tensor category, as defined here, it may not be semi-simple. But in subfactor theory, the tensor category are always semi-simple because they are unitary. Particular, they are. But in general, tensor category may not be semi-simple. So in locally finite, in the non-semi-simple case, you have this notion of Jordan order sequence, etc. But the notion of I forgot the name, projective cover, etc. But we will not deal with that here. Okay, so Frobenius subalgebra in a monoidal category. Okay, so now, as I said, the goal of this talk is was to define the notion in the reformulation of Watatani's theorem. So we define Frobenius algebra, we define connected. Now we need the notion of Frobenius subalgebra. Frobenius subalgebra. Okay. Okay, so the first to define a Frobenius subalgebra, we need the notion of dual. So the notion of dual is related to rigid. In general, a monoidal category may not be rigid, but it makes sense to define a rigid structure on one object, even if not all objects admit right dual or left dual. So having both a left and right dual is mean rigid. Even not all objects add, you can define. You can say one object, define what it means for one object to have a dual and to be self-dual. So the notion of dual, recall, is given by so for an object for this to be a dual of X is given by another object. So let me restart. You have an object X in a monoidal category. A dual is another object together with two morphism satisfying some zigzag. So one morphism is defined like that, the other is modeled like that, and it satisfies some zigzag relation equals identity. So I will not come back to that. We will come back to that in the class in details. Here, the dual is denoted X star. Okay, so here we are saying that X is its own dual. Why? Because you take this evaluation map, so and this co-evaluation map, and you can combine together using the Frobenius algebra structure. This is something like that, etc. So something like that. And using unit and co-unit axiom, you come back to that. So you really have this equals the identity, etc. So I will come back to that in details during the class. So a Frobenius algebra is an object with a dual, which is not true in general for an object in monal category, but more than that, it is its own dual. So it's a self-dual. So the duality depends on the choice of evaluation and co-evaluation map. But if you choose that, you can write X star equal X. But if you choose another, you can choose another morphism, and then you may only have an isomorphism here. But here, if you make this specific choice, which is very accurate, in fact, you have an equality which simplifies everything. So this is very important, and this will be useful for the definition of a Frobenius subalgebra. Another important point here is to be careful is that a morphism, a Frobenius algebra morphism, is always an isomorphism. So by Frobenius algebra morphism, I mean a morphism between two Frobenius algebra which keep all the structure of Frobenius algebra. So it keeps the structure of co-unital coalgebra and the structure of unital algebra. So if you have such a morphism between two Frobenius algebra, it's automatically an isomorphism. And it's an exercise to prove that. We will explain that in details during the class, but it's a nice exercise to try by yourself, to be more comfortable with the Frobenius algebra structure. So it's always an isomorphism. So if you want a notion of Frobenius subalgebra, the Frobenius subalgebra will not be isomorphic. So you will define it using some morphism, but this morphism cannot be an isomorphism, cannot be a Frobenius algebra morphism. So it's you need to define it as you need to a weak version of a Frobenius algebra morphism. You have to remove some assumption. So you define it as a monomorphism. So remember the notion. We are in abelian category. In fact, you don't even have, you are not in an abelian category. So you can define, okay. You can define the notion of monomorphism and epimorphism even without abelian structure. It's called a monomorphism. An epimorphism is something which are left cancellative and right cancellative, I forgot. But you can even generalize everything without abelian structure, but abelian structure, it's a structure which generalize, permit I forgot. Let me give, if I can give intuitively one word, because I may not come back to that later. Yeah, okay. So what I said before was not completely correct. The notion of abelian category is not to generalize the notion of injective and surjective map, because you can do that in general for category using monomorphism and epimorphism, which means left and right conservative. What the notion of abelian category generalizes is the notion of kernel and co-kernel. Okay, the kernel of a morphism, co-kernel of the morphism. For that, you need abelian category. Okay, sorry about this confusion. But anyway, injective map. So an embedding generalized by the notion of monomorphism, which is left cancellative. If I'm not mistaken, otherwise it's right cancellative. You cannot know. It's one of the two. So an embedding, so generalization of the notion of embedding. So okay, a monomorphism, but this embedding cannot be a Frobenius algebra morphism, otherwise it will be an isomorphism. So you keep co-unital algebra, but you just have unital morphism. It's not it's unital and co-unital algebra morphism. So it's an algebra morphism, but it's not a coalgebra morphism. It is unital and co-unital algebra, but not coalgebra. So to be a Frobenius algebra morphism, here you are missing the coalgebra morphism structure. So this structure do not keep the coalgebra structure. So this is very important. This is a Frobenius algebra morphism in which you remove the coalgebra structure, the weaker version, and you have that it should satisfy that the double dual of this morphism is itself. So here we define the notion of dual of a morphism of an object, but you can also define the notion of dual of a morphism, and we will come back to that in details during the class. The dual of a morphism. Yeah. If you have a morphism f from x to y, then you get a dual morphism from y, the dual of y to the dual of x. So it reverse the arrow. And you can apply the dual of the dual, and here the assumption is that this is the same. Okay. Okay. So this is the definition we used. In fact, we did not find this definition in the literature. So this definition is our own definition in the paper. We have to create our own definition, the definition which work very well. So as far as I know, there is no, before our paper, there is no explicitly an explicit definition of Frobenius subalgebra. Okay. And in fact, our third definition was not this one. In fact, our definition changed with time to find the good notion. Our very initial naive definition use Frobenius algebra morphism, but then we discussed with Ingo Rinkel and Jürgen Fuchs, who explained to us that it's always an isomorphism, so you have to have something weaker. So what we found is that you can deduce from that the composition of this monomorphism with its dual is the identity of X prime. So X prime is a Frobenius subalgebra. If you compose this way, this is the identity, and you can deduce this equality from this definition. Again, in our initial definition, this was in the definition that we realized that you can replace, I guess we we replace that by that. If I'm not mistaken, in fact, this will be explained in details why it's more relevant. It's more beautiful to write unital instead of writing that. But anyway, you can. And so you compose this way, you get the identity. You compose the other way. So I star composed with I, you get a self-dual unital idempotent. And this is very important, this notion of self-dual unital idempotent. So self-dual mean, so B star equal B, okay? And because B is a morphism from X to X. So it's not identity, but it's self-dual, so B star equal B. It's unital. Unital mean it satisfies when you compose with the unit object, so everything works well. So I forgot unital mean you have B from X to X. So you do that, and it's what? It's just like that. Yeah. You do that, like that. This is the meaning of unital morphism. And idempotent means if you compose with itself, it's itself. And this notion of self-dual unital idempotent is very important. Okay. So, example of a Frobenius subalgebra coming from subfactor theory. So, this is exactly what we wanted, in fact. It generalizes the notion of intermediate subfactor. So, you take a finite index subfactor, n included in M, and an intermediate algebra, in fact, between these two von Neumann algebra. This is a Frobenius subalgebra of M. So remember that this is a Frobenius algebra in the category, the subcategory of B module generated by M, and this one is a Frobenius subalgebra. And the converse is also true. In the unitary setting, every unitary setting which is not defined in this slide, every unitary Frobenius subalgebra of M comes from an intermediate subfactor. But what is an open problem to, at least to us, it's not clear that every Frobenius subalgebra of a unitary Frobenius subalgebra, we don't know whether every Frobenius subalgebra of a Frobenius algebra, unitary Frobenius algebra object in a unitary tensor category is always a unitary Frobenius subalgebra. This is not clear. It's not clear at all. Because in the unitary setting, you have a notion of adjoint, which is in operator algebra, the adjoint is denoted by a star, but in category theory, it's denoted by a dagger. So you have to be careful. Do not confuse dagger and star. And so a von Neumann algebra is self-adjoint. So it's self-dagger, if you like. But you can have intermediate algebra which are not self-dagger. For example, you take the complex and the M2 of C, these are two von Neumann algebra, but in between you can put the algebra of upper triangular. This is not self-adjoint because the adjoint of that is something lower triangular. So it's not self-adjoint, but it is an intermediate algebra. So be careful. So you have two unitary Frobenius algebra, but you have two von Neumann algebra. You have something in between which is not unitary. So it's not clear at all. Maybe it's true, but it's not clear. It may not be true, in fact. That this intermediate, unfortunately, this upper triangular is an algebra, but it's not a Frobenius algebra. So this cannot be an example, a counterexample, but it's not clear that unitary pass to sub-object. Yeah. So when you consider, that's why at the beginning, this is very important to clarify that because this was not clear to me at the beginning. That's why you have to write unitary everywhere. Unitary, unitary, unitary. You should not miss this unitary. If you put that, this is not true. Or at least it's open. Unitary from a subalgebra of a unitary from algebra in a unitary tensor category. You have to put unitary everywhere. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we know in subfactor theory that there exist finite index subfactor with infinitely many intermediate subfactors. But we remember that Guattari theorem is something about finitely many. But these examples are not irreducible. So in fact, here you know that you cannot avoid the connected assumption. Because for subfactor theory, if you avoid irreducibility, you have example with infinitely many intermediates. So this assumption is unavoidable. You have to keep it. Maybe you can generalize in some sense, I don't know. But you cannot remove. This is in fact, this is very natural and very important assumption. If you want to generalize something, this will not this one. You will try to generalize something else, usually. For example, basically what you want to extend to the unitary, to generalize unitary. And this is what we will do, in fact. We will try to generalize as much as possible unitary and also tensor. But connected, in fact, we did not work much on how to generalize connected. Okay. So, and very important notion, relation coming from subfactor theory, more precisely from subfactor planar algebra theory, is a notion of exchange relation. So I will recall the history here. So let me just state the result, and this will be the exchange relation. And then I will explain where I come back. And some extra result. So this result here will not be covered in the class. At least it's not covered. This is another paper. So the paper we are covering, called Frobenius subalgebra lattice in tensor category, is the paper before this one. In this new paper, we focus on exchange relation. But this theorem may not be proved in this class. Unless if you have extra time, maybe we can start with this new paper. In fact, I don't know. I don't know if this class will require 1 semester or 2 semesters. If we can finish the paper in 1 semester, a priori we will not do that, this paper. But if we need an extra semester, maybe 2 semesters will be too much for this first paper. So maybe we will include also this paper if we do a second semester, but for now, I don't know. Okay, so the theorem is the following. So this is a new theorem in our first paper with Molinac-Ghosh. So you take 2 Frobenius algebra, X and X prime. You take an algebra morphism between these 2 Frobenius algebra, denoted by F, which is equal to its double dual. It's not self-dual as a morphism, but equal to its double dual. and you take, so exactly as, in fact, the B here, you take this G, F composed with, so exactly as here, you have equal, this is equal to its double dual for a Frobenius subalgebra, and you take this. Here, this is much more general because F may not be a monomorphism. It's not. It's just an algebra morphism. It's not assumed to be monomorphism. It's not assumed to be unital or co-unital. Just an algebra morphism, which is equal to its double dual, and you define that, and you get directly this relation. So when we discover that for the first time, for us, this was fantastic because you say, wow, you can generalize this exchange relation in a so general setting. This is very, very general. This is just a monoidal category. Monoidal category is very, very, very general structure. And this notion coming from subfactor planar algebra, which is in some sense very restricted setting, a unitary tensor category, in fact, generalize and in fact very naturally to a very general setting. So this theorem really makes illustrate the importance of the slogan at the beginning. What we say here. It's relevant to distinguish the functional analysis aspect of subfactor theory from its categorical component. And this first theorem really illustrates and really show how much it is important to do that, because here you have a very general result, which can be applied to something to very far in the mathematics from subfactor theory. Some monoidal categories is very general. It can be very interesting to find application of this generalization and also the next one to other area of mathematics involving monoidal categories, such as number theory or algebraic geometry. So this is very general for any monoidal category, so you may have application to number theory or algebraic geometry. We did not work much about that now, but this has a lot of potential. In fact, and also we generalize also other results. So this is very important. Okay, so this one, as I said, hold for Frobenius subalgebra idempotent, because this is exactly this assumption for the B we said before. And the converse hold in an abelian monoidal category. So if you assume the monoidal category to be abelian, then this relation is equal. So as I will say here, is equivalent to Frobenius subalgebra. So I will state that in more precisely here. And this generalize a result by Dietmar Bisch in 1994 and Peace Jones in 2000. Stated in the unitary setting. So there's a little subtlety. I will go into the details during the class, but in fact, you have a abelian monoidal category way to state the thing, which is here, and you have a way to state that for unitary tensor category, which is not an immediate application unless you prove some extra conjecture. But it is very close, very similar. It is very analogous. But you have a little details. You have to be careful. So what I said here, it generalize the result. This is not completely true. We can say it's 99% true. you have a little detail you have to be careful, and we will explain in detail that during the class. But maybe it's 1% true, but up to some open problem you have to solve. For example, whether any Frobenius subalgebra, the problem I said, any Frobenius subalgebra of a unitary Frobenius subalgebra is unitary. If you have that, then it should be a true generalization. Otherwise, it's just an analogous generalization. Okay, so the result, a self-dual unital idempotent from two Frobenius algebra objects in an abelian model category arise from a Frobenius subalgebra if and only if it satisfies this exchange relation. Okay? So, self-dual unital idempotent. So here we are not talking about F. We are talking about, so when I said the converse hold, I'm not talking about F, I'm just talking about that, the one. Self-dual unital idempotent come from a Frobenius subalgebra as here, here, is of this form, if and only if it satisfies the exchange relation. Again, this is very natural to prove, but it's a fantastic result. This is fantastic. The setting is very general again, it's monoidal category. So again, you should have application to algebraic geometry, number theory, and we will provide application to sister algebra theory, etc. But because we are not so familiar with algebraic geometry, but we should find application, should find people interested in that in this topic to discuss with and to find application to this very natural result. This is very important. Okay, so in fact, in this theorem, we did not even assume X to be connected. But if you assume X to be connected, in fact, you can remove the unital assumption. Okay, so this is very nice, in fact. So in particular, this makes you have something non-trivial even for Frobenius algebra in VEC, because you don't need to assume connected. So you can reformulate that as a in VEC, and this is what we play with in this other paper. We formulate exchange relation in VEC, and you get the notion of, I found it. Anyway, doesn't matter. So the exchange relation in VEC, you remember the name?
Oh, averaging operator.
Averaging operator. Averaging operator. Okay. So another result. Now, so this result, so this is true for any monoidal. Okay. This is true for abelian monoidal. And now you have something which is true for linear monoidal. So you don't need abelian, just linear. And you generalize this theorem due to Landau in surfactor planar algebra theory. Convolution product. So we need to define this notion of convolution product. So we generalize, very natural generalization of the notion of convolution product in Fourier analysis. This is a purely categorical generation of the Fourier analysis notion of convolution product. Again, this is very nice. So this is not due to us, I guess. This already appeared in the literature. This way to do. So you don't even need this to be a Frobenius algebra, just algebra coalgebra object. You don't even need this to be unital and co-unital, just algebra coalgebra object. And you don't need a Frobenius structure action. So you take an algebra coalgebra object, in a linear monoidal category, I guess. So for the definition, you don't need linear. But for the theorem, you need linear. So here it's just a monoidal category. You take two morphisms from X to itself, so and mean from X to itself, from XX, and you define this convolution product like that. So you put the morphism A, morphism B, you put here the co-multiplication and the multiplication. So algebraically, it's written this way. Delta compose A tensor B compose M. Okay, so this definition makes sense for any monoidal category. Now you will need linear, but by linear, in fact, you make k-linear, so you need a vector space. So in this theorem, we will use several new ingredients. So the notion of trace of a morphism between a Frobenius algebra and itself, because the Frobenius algebra itself is equal to its dual, you can define the trace directly of a morphism directly by a closed loop like that. Otherwise, you have to be careful. Otherwise, this is evaluation and co-evaluation map. When you, in general, if it is not self-dual, you have to deal with dual, and you have to deal with the dual of X and the double dual of X. And here you need to put some pivotal structure or some isomorphism between X and its double dual. But because X equal X star, you don't need to put an isomorphism to define to have something well defined. This does not mean you don't want to put. You can also put something, and in fact, this is just an isomorphism between X and itself. What you want to think about is just a pivotal structure or a spherical structure, but in general, just an isomorphism makes sense. So you put here, you put something here, alpha. So trace with respect to alpha. So it's just like that, alpha, beta, or the other way, but I forgot which one, from top to bottom. So it's more like that, I guess, beta alpha. Anyway, and this, you take this as this is a morphism from the unit object to unit object. So you compose the unit morphism and the co-unit morphism. So it's something from 1 to 1. So it's a morphism in and C of 1. So this is just an element in and C of 1, but if you assume that the unit is linear simple, which means that, then under this assumption, this is nothing but an element in the field. But in general, it's just an element here, which may not be the field. This, in general, may be not one-dimensional or k-linear. But if the unit is linear simple, this is one-dimensional. So this is a scalar, and this scalar is denoted. So this morphism is denoted mu x, and in this case, this mu x is a scalar. So as a consequence of the exchange relation, we generalize Landau's theorem. So you need connectedness. So you take a connected Frobenius algebra in a k-linear monoidal category, where the unit is linear simple. You take two Frobenius subalgebra of X, okay, as defined before. So you have two objects together with each unital counital algebra monomorphism, which is equal to its double dual. And so you take that, and the theorem states that there is an idempotent denoted B index A, B. So this is just a notation. I will explain something here. Such that the trace, so the unindexed trace of B index A compose B index B times, so this is a scalar now, then this idempotent is just the convolution product of BA and BB times this constant. Okay, so this means that this idempotent, in the case that this is non-zero, this idempotent is that divided by that. But if it is zero, then you cannot divide by zero. So that's why we write this way. And if now you are here, this is the unindexed trace, but now you apply the indexed trace here, the trace of alpha as defined here. So this is a constant, you keep it, but now you have trace alpha of that, and the convolution product, when you have this constant, deal with the trace this way. So you replace by a multiplication, but you need this to get multiplication. So you have that. For every morphism alpha, for every algebra morphism alpha, so here to be true, to this equality to be true, you need alpha to be, in fact, this may not be an isomorphism here, this any morphism, but this for this equality to be true, you need alpha to be an algebra morphism. So this makes sense for any morphism, but for this equality, this should be an algebra morphism. It may not be an isomorphism in general. But the main example is you take algebra to be the identity, so then the trace is just, if alpha is the identity, this trace is this trace, if you like. So you put identity here. But we will need non-trivial alpha in the proof. That's why we introduce this notation. And the remark regarding this notation, in fact, you can, if you think in terms of subfactor, intermediate subfactor, in fact, A and B represent intermediate subfactors, so represent a von Neumann algebra, and it makes sense to make a product of algebra. In the set sense, here you have an algebra, you can, the set theoretical product of how to say, pointwise product. But in general, for a monoid category, A and B are not set, so it makes no sense to make a product. But we expect, even if we don't need to prove that this is the image of this composition, of the multiplication composed with the monomorphism for A and B. So this image, which in fact, I don't know if you need, maybe you need abelian to define the notion of image. Yeah, I guess, maybe. But if you, anyway, so this is just a remark. Maybe you need abelian, linear, and you have a notion of image, and maybe this image will be exactly this. So this represents the product, in fact. But this is just expected, and in fact, we don't really need that. And so it's almost time. Yeah, so I will stop here. So it's, we see we need half of the slide. So tomorrow you will do the second half of the slides. So tomorrow we will start with the notion of rigidity invariance. And in fact, this notion of rigidity invariance is very, very important. At the beginning of the first version of our paper, the rigidity invariance was missing, and in fact, the paper was false. In fact, we found some counter example in VEC, for example. So you need something very important here, rigidity invariance, and in fact, this rigidity So I guess this notion is completely new in the literature. So the experts are not, this is a problem. The experts are not comfortable with that. So that they cannot judge that. They can say, oh, this is just an extra assumption which makes the result not as general as it should be. But in fact, this notion is fundamental. The rigidity invariance, in fact, is exactly uh, correspond to when you say you consider unitary Frobenius subalgebra in a unitary tensor category. The fact that you specify unitary, the way to generalize that, when you say you remove, you want to generalize unitary, generalizing unitary is not just removing unitary, but in fact you need some rigidity invariance. Unitary implies rigidity invariance, but when you want to generalize the Watt-Attanis theorem beyond unitary, you need rigidity invariance. So this rigidity invariance is a fundamental tool. And as we will explain tomorrow, the result is not true if you don't assume rigidity invariance. So this is a very important notion, and experts will have to digest this notion. This is a completely new notion. Okay, so see you tomorrow. So I will put my line. Yeah. See you tomorrow.